The knock didn't sound like a visit. It sounded like a decision. 3 sharp raps, confident, impatient, like whoever stood on my porch already believed the door belonged to them. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and glanced at the clock above the stove. Late morning. Gray Seattle light leaking through the curtains. The kettle was still warm from the tea I'd made and barely tasted. A week. It had only been a week since my son's wedding. My house still smelled faintly of the lilies from the reception centerpiece I'd brought home because nobody else wanted it. They were starting to brown around the edges, petals soft and curling like tired paper. I walked toward the front door slowly, not because my knees demanded it, though they could, but because my instincts did. Something about that knock told me this wasn't Matthew coming to tell me he missed me. This was business. I pulled the door open. Brooke stood there in a cream-colored coat that looked like it had never seen rain. Her hair was smooth and pinned back in the neat, polished way she wore when she wanted to be taken seriously. She offered me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Beside her was a man I'd never seen before. Mid-40s, maybe. Clean-shaven, crisp suit. Leather briefcase held close to his body like it was worth more than a person. "Hi, Mom," Brooke said brightly, like she'd practiced the tone in a mirror. "Hope we're not interrupting anything." Interrupting. As if she was stopping by with muffins. Behind the bright words, her eyes flicked past me into my home. Quick, professional, assessing. Like a buyer walking into an open house, I tightened my grip on the doorknob. "Matthew isn't with you?" Brooke's smile stayed in place. "He's handling something quick. But we didn't need him for this." Her hand floated toward the man as if presenting him on a stage. "This is Daniel. He helps families with paperwork. He's very thorough." The man nodded like a banker greeting an account balance. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said smoothly. "Pleasure." He said my name like it was printed on a file tab. I forced myself to breathe evenly. "What kind of paperwork?" Brooke gave a small laugh. Not amused. Reassuring. That laugh people use on children and old ladies. "Oh, nothing scary," she said. "Just responsible stuff. Home documents, protection, planning ahead." Planning ahead. Those words were always used like a blanket. Soft, warm, safe. But blankets can smother. I stepped back and let them in because refusing on the porch would become a story later. She's so difficult. She's so paranoid. She's not thinking clearly. They walked inside like they belonged there. Daniel's eyes moved over the hallway table, the framed photos, the antique mirror my husband and I had found at a flea market 30 years ago. He looked at everything without really seeing it, the way a person looks at numbers. Brooke's heels tapped against the hardwood, steady and certain, like a countdown. They followed me into the living room. That room was my soft place. The couch where Matthew used to sprawl with his comic books. The armchair where my husband fell asleep watching late-night baseball. The lamp with the cracked shade I kept because it still worked and because memory mattered. Brooke didn't look at any of that. She didn't look at the history. She looked at the real estate. Daniel set his briefcase on the coffee table with a quiet, deliberate thump. He clicked it open and pulled out a folder so thick it looked like it had its own weight. Brooke sat without being invited. Right on the couch cushion where Matthew used to rest his head when he was sick. She crossed her legs, perfectly composed, and placed her hands together like a woman about to close a deal. I stayed standing. Not because I was trying to be rude, because something in me refused to lower myself. Brooke tilted her head. "Mom, you've been through a lot. The wedding was a lot. And you're on your own now. We just want to make sure everything is organized in case anything happens." "In case anything happens," I repeated. Daniel slid a paper from the folder, smooth as a magician. "This is very standard," he said. "Common with family planning. Title review, authorization, asset management provisions." "Asset management," Brooke echoed, smiling like it was a gift. "It's really for your peace of mind." Peace of mind. The funny thing about peace is it's often what people demand from you when they want you quiet. I sat down slowly in the armchair across from them. If they wanted a scene, they weren't going to get it. Not yet. Brooke leaned forward. "Mom, we're worried about you. This house is, well, it's a lot. Big responsibility, insurance, taxes, maintenance, and it's in a nice area." There it was. Not concern. Location. Daniel opened another page, his finger hovering near the bottom like an arrow. "We'll need you to confirm your identity and then sign to allow your son and daughter-in-law to assist you." Assist. The word was dressed up as kindness, but it came with invisible chains. My heart did something strange. Pounded, then steadied. Like it recognized a threat and decided to sharpen. Because I knew this moment. Not the exact details, not these exact faces, but the pattern. And I wasn't walking into it blind. A week ago at the reception, I'd watched Brooke laugh with people she'd known for 5 minutes, while my son never once crossed the room to ask if I was okay. I'd heard her say, soft enough to pass as a joke, "It's so nice she doesn't live close." You know how moms can be. And I'd smiled then too. Because when you raise a child, you learn a certain kind of smiling. The kind that hides pain so the baby doesn't get scared. But this smile had a different purpose. This smile was a lock. Brooke slid a few more papers toward me. "We talked to someone who specializes in helping seniors. It's all very normal. It just means if you ever need help, we can step in right away." The word seniors landed like a stamp. I looked at the papers. Lots of bold headers. Lots of hereby. A few phrases that jumped out like warning flares. Joint authority. Transfer upon sale. Incapacity provision. Power to manage proceeds. I didn't show my reaction. Instead, I did something my mother taught me long ago. Back when men used to talk over women at the bank and expect them to nod, I asked innocent questions. "What exactly does transfer upon sale mean?" I said, tilting my head like I didn't understand. Brooke's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes sharpened. "Oh, it's just technical language. It means if you sell the house, the process is smoother." "And why would I sell my house?" I asked gently. She made a soft sound, half sigh, half laugh, like I was being difficult without realizing it. "Mom, come on. You're alone. This place is too much. Don't you ever feel overwhelmed?" "No," but I let my face soften. I let my shoulders drop slightly. I gave her the version of me she wanted to see. "A little," I admitted, barely above a whisper. Brooke's eyes lit for the first time since she'd arrived. Daniel leaned in, pen poised. "Then this is the right step. We can take care of it before it becomes urgent." Before it becomes urgent. That phrase had teeth. Because urgency is how people steal time. And if they steal your time, they steal your choices. I looked from Brooke to Daniel and back. I kept my voice calm. "Where is Matthew right now?" I asked. Brooke didn't hesitate. "Busy, but he knows we're here." I nodded slowly. It would have been easier if she'd lied poorly, if she'd stumbled, if she'd looked guilty. But she looked confident. That's what scared me most. Confident people don't ask permission. They assume. Daniel tapped the paper lightly. "We can be done in 15 minutes. Then you won't have to worry anymore." Won't have to worry anymore. I stared at the pen like it was a knife. Then I smiled. Not sweetly, not warmly, just enough to seem cooperative. "I appreciate you both," I said, letting gratitude coat my words like syrup. "I really do. It's just, my eyes aren't what they used to be. And this looks like a lot." Brooke's shoulders relaxed a fraction. She thought I was surrendering. "I could make coffee," I continued. "And maybe you can explain each page slowly. I don't want to make a mistake." Daniel nodded, almost bored. "Of course." Brooke's smile widened. "See? This is why we're helping. You shouldn't have to handle complex things alone." I stood and walked into the kitchen. The second I crossed the doorway, the smile fell from my face like a mask dropped on the floor. My hands were steady as I reached for the coffee tin. That was the strange part. A week ago, I would have been shaking, crying, feeling guilty for not being grateful. But over the last few months, quietly, privately, I'd felt a shift inside me. A hardening, not bitterness, awakening. I poured water into the machine slowly, listening to the sounds in my living room. The whisper of papers, the soft tap of Brooke's nails against my coffee table, Daniel's voice, low and smooth. They were talking like I wasn't there, like I was already handled. I set 2 mugs on the counter, then paused, and I glanced toward the pantry closet. Behind the canned soup and extra paper towels was a small safe my husband installed years ago. Not because he was dramatic, but because he was careful. I'd opened it recently for the first time in months. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. Because something in Brooke's eyes at the wedding, something cold and calculating, made my stomach twist with warning. So I'd started preparing, quietly, keeping my mouth shut, keeping my face pleasant, keeping my fear out of sight. Silence had been my shield. Now I realized it would also be my weapon. I carried the coffee mugs into the living room. Brooke accepted hers without thanking me. Daniel didn't even look up. "Okay." Brooke said, tapping the first page with a manicured finger. So this one is just confirming you want us to help you simplify your living situation. I sat down again, mug warm in my hands. And this one, she continued, flipping to the next. Let's Matthew handle the sale process if you decide to go forward. It's easier that way. Less stress. My mouth went dry. I kept my tone soft. Sale process? Brooke nodded, cheerful. Yes. It's time to be practical, Mom. Practical. That was her favorite word. Practical meant, do what benefits me and call it logic. I looked at the papers again, then up at her face. My husband built this home with me, I said quietly. Matthew grew up here. Brooke's expression didn't move. I know, she said, like I'd mentioned an old appliance. But memories don't pay taxes. Daniel cleared his throat. This is really about ensuring your assets are protected. Protected. From who? From me? I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth slow my heartbeat. Then I set the mug down carefully. I'm sure you mean well, I said, voice light. But I don't sign anything the first time I see it. That's just how I've always been. The air shifted, not dramatically, just enough. Brooke's smile tightened at the corners. Mom, it's not that serious. Daniel's eyes flicked up to mine for the first time. There was patience there, but it was the kind you offer a stubborn child. It's standard, he said, and delaying can create complications. Complications. There it was again. Urgency. Pressure. Control. Brooke leaned closer, lowering her voice as if being kind. Mom, don't you trust your son? That question hit like a slap wrapped in velvet, because it wasn't really about trust. It was about obedience. I swallowed, letting my eyes glisten just enough to look fragile. I do, I whispered. I trust him. I get confused sometimes when there are too many pages. Brooke softened instantly. Exactly, she said, shooting Daniel a look. That's why we're doing this, so you don't have to think about it. In that moment, I understood something with perfect clarity. They weren't here to help me. They were here to replace me, to take the keys to my life and tell themselves it was kindness. I nodded slowly, playing my part. Maybe, I said, voice trembling on purpose. Maybe you can leave the papers with me, and I'll read them tonight. I'll call Matthew tomorrow. We can talk together. Brooke's eyes hardened again. She recovered quickly, but not fast enough to hide the flash of irritation. It's better if we handle it now, she said, too bright. Daniel's schedule is tight. Daniel closed the folder halfway, like a warning. It's best not to postpone. These matters can become urgent unexpectedly. My palms were damp, but my mind was clear. Because while they thought they were cornering a lonely old widow, they had no idea what I'd quietly put in motion. And they had no idea that I'd already decided something important. I wasn't signing a single word. Not today. Not ever. Not without witnesses. Not without my own counsel. Not without a plan. I lifted my gaze and smiled at Brooke. Sweet as sugar. You're right, I said softly. Let's not postpone. Brooke's face brightened, triumphant. Daniel slid the pen toward me. I reached out slowly and stopped just short of taking it. But first, I added, I want to do one small thing, just for my peace of mind. Brooke blinked. What? I looked at them with innocent eyes. I'd like us to read every clause out loud, I said. So I understand. If this is for my protection, then clarity is part of protection, isn't it? Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Brooke's smile froze. And in that frozen second, I felt it. The first crack in their confidence. Because people who come to help don't mind explaining. People who come to take prefer you quiet. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. And as Brooke opened her mouth to respond, my doorbell rang again. One long press. Not a polite tap. A deliberate announcement. Brooke turned her head sharply, irritation flickering. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Are you expecting someone? Brooke asked, voice suddenly sharper. I stood slowly. My heart didn't race this time. It steadied, because I knew exactly who that bell could be. And for the first time in a week, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the wedding. Safe. I walked to the door. And as I reached for the knob, I thought, go ahead, smile, act sweet, keep playing along. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone thinks is harmless. 3 months earlier, I still believed effort could fix anything. That love, if prepared carefully enough, generously enough, could soften sharp edges and turn strangers into family. When Matthew told me he was bringing Brooke over for dinner, I felt the kind of nervous excitement I hadn't felt in years. The good kind. The hopeful kind. I stood in my kitchen early that morning, sleeves rolled up, flour dusting my hands like snowfall. The radio hummed low in the background, some old song about home. I kneaded dough slowly, the rhythm familiar. Grounding. This matters, I told myself. This woman wasn't just my son's girlfriend. She was the future. The person who would share holidays, raise children, shape the life Matthew built after me. I wanted her to feel welcomed, seen, valued. So I cooked, not because I thought food could buy affection, but because food was how love had always moved through my family. My mother cooked when she wanted to say, "I'm proud of you." I cooked when I wanted to say, "You belong here." I went to the store twice. Once for the basics, once because I remembered Matthew loved a certain spice in his soup and I didn't want to forget anything. I chose ingredients carefully: fresh vegetables, good meat, butter, not margarine. I stood in the aisle debating brands longer than necessary, imagining Brooke watching me cook, maybe asking for the recipe, maybe laughing with me at the counter. I stayed on my feet all afternoon. By evening, the house smelled warm and full, like safety. The kind of smell that makes you breathe deeper without realizing it. I changed clothes twice. First, something practical, then something softer. I settled on a pale pink dress I only wore on special days. I brushed my hair carefully, dabbed on lipstick I rarely used anymore, and studied my reflection longer than usual. "You still matter," I whispered to the woman in the mirror. The doorbell rang. My heart lifted. I opened the door with a smile already in place. Matthew stood there, familiar and comforting, and beside him was Brooke. She was beautiful in a way that felt deliberate. Every hair in place, nails glossy, shoes that clicked sharply against my porch like punctuation marks. I stepped forward instinctively, arms opening in welcome. "Brooke," I said warmly, "I'm so happy to finally meet you." She hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long, then leaned in briefly, brushing my shoulder with her fingertips instead of returning the hug. Her body stayed stiff. "Nice to meet you," she said, voice polite but distant, eyes already moving past me into my house. Not curious. Evaluating. I swallowed the small sting and stepped aside. "Come in, please." Her heels clicked across my floor, loud in a way that made my home feel suddenly smaller. She glanced at the furniture, the walls, the framed photos. Not with interest, but with comparison, like she was measuring my life against some internal standard. At dinner, I tried. I truly tried. I asked about her job, her hobbies, what she liked to eat, where she grew up. Her answers were short, efficient, closed. Yes. No. Not really. I'm very busy. Each response felt like a door quietly closing. She tasted the food with a careful expression, separating ingredients with her fork, inspecting them like something unfamiliar. Matthew noticed. He tried to fill the space with compliments. "Mom's cooking is amazing, right?" Brooke nodded without enthusiasm. "It's fine, fine." I smiled and refilled her plate anyway. "Do you enjoy cooking?" I asked, hopeful. She looked up at me like the question surprised her. "I don't have time for that. I prefer ordering in or eating at proper places." Proper. The word landed heavier than it should have. I felt suddenly aware of my simple dishes, my worn table, my hands. Hands that had fed my son for decades. Matthew cleared his throat, changed the subject, laughed a little too loudly. I laughed too, because that's what women like me do. We smooth things over. We make ourselves smaller so others don't feel uncomfortable. After dinner, Brooke sat perched on the edge of the couch, scrolling on her phone while Matthew chatted with me. She didn't ask a single question about me. Not one. When it was time for them to leave, she smiled again. Polite, distant, practiced. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "That was kind of you." Kind. Not warm, not lovely, not thoughtful. Just kind. When the door closed behind them, the house felt colder. I stood in the kitchen, staring at half-eaten plates and untouched desserts, trying to understand the hollow feeling in my chest. Maybe she's just shy, I told myself. Maybe first meetings are awkward. Maybe I'm overthinking. That night, as I washed dishes alone, the water running too hot, I noticed something I hadn't before. The joy I'd poured into the meal hadn't been received. It had been observed, judged, filed away, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice I wasn't ready to listen to yet whispered, "Be careful." After that first dinner, I told myself the hardest part was over. Introductions were awkward. People needed time. Love didn't always arrive warm. It sometimes crept in quietly. I wanted to believe that. So when Brooke started coming over more often, I welcomed her every time with the same effort. Fresh coffee, clean house, a smile ready before the door even opened. But something was different now. She didn't settle in the way guests usually do. She perched, sat on the very edge of chairs, never removed her coat, never relaxed her shoulders. It was as if my home repelled her. She rarely looked up from her phone. When she did, it was usually to comment on something practical. "You still use this kind of thermostat?" "This room could use better lighting." "Have you ever thought about repainting?" Always suggestions, never questions, and always spoken as if decisions had already been made. Matthew, to his credit, noticed the tension. He tried to soften things, joked, changed topics. But gradually, subtly, something shifted. He stopped correcting her. If Brooke remarked that my neighborhood was getting older, Matthew nodded instead of defending it. If she mentioned how much easier life would be closer to the city, he agreed instead of reminding her this was the house where he grew up. It happened slowly enough that I almost missed it. One afternoon, as I poured coffee, Brooke smiled at me with that same polished expression. "You must be looking forward to having more time to yourself once we're married," she said lightly. The words sounded harmless, but they carried weight. "More time?" I repeated. She glanced at Matthew, then back at me. "Well, yes. We'll be busy building our own life. You'll finally get to relax." Relax, like I was being gently dismissed from a role I hadn't agreed to leave. "I enjoy spending time with my son," I said quietly. Brooke's smile didn't waver, but something passed between her and Matthew. Quick, silent, practiced. A look. I didn't understand it then, but I felt it. Wedding planning made everything worse. Decisions happened without me. Dates, venues, details. I found out afterward, like a distant relative. When I offered to help, Brooke accepted only when it benefited her image. "Oh, could you drop off these invitations? Would you mind picking up those linens?" Never opinions, never input. Once I offered something deeply personal. "I could bake the cake," I said, my voice soft with tradition. "It's been in our family for years." Brooke laughed. Not cruelly, not loudly, just enough to sting. "Oh no," she said. "I don't want anything homemade." Homemade. The word sounded like a flaw. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, holding the apron my own mother had given me decades ago. My hands shook as I folded it, the fabric worn thin from years of use. For the first time, I wondered if the love I'd built my life around was no longer valued. Or worse, if it was inconvenient. At the wedding rehearsal, I noticed something else. Seating arrangements. I was placed far from the front, behind people who barely knew my son. Brooke's coworkers sat closer than I did. I told myself it was a mistake. But mistakes don't repeat themselves. At the ceremony, I watched my son from a distance, my neck craned, my smile fixed. Applause drowned out my thoughts. At the reception, Brooke introduced me to her friends as Matthew's mom, never once using my name. "She's great in the kitchen," she added, smiling sweetly. 30 years of motherhood reduced to a skill set. When it came time for speeches, I waited patiently. Names were called. Applause rose and fell. My name never came. Someone finally asked. "Oh," Brooke said lightly, glancing my way. "She can say a few words." A few. I stood, heart pounding, hands trembling. Not from age, but from realization. I barely finished my second sentence before clapping erupted. Forced. Final. I sat down to polite smiles and hollow congratulations. Later, as music filled the room, Matthew danced. With Brooke, with her family, with her friends. Not once with me. When I left early, tired of pretending, Brooke hugged me lightly. "Thanks for coming," she said. Not "thank you for raising him." Not "we're glad you're here." Just "thanks for coming." As I walked away, I heard laughter behind me. Someone joked about mothers-in-law. Brooke laughed too. That was the night something changed inside me. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't cry in public. I drove home in silence, tears blurring the road, feeling smaller than I ever had. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. A quiet, unfamiliar thought. This isn't accidental. This is deliberate. And if it was deliberate, then I needed to start paying attention. I arrived early. I always arrive early. It's how I was raised. Show respect, be prepared, don't inconvenience anyone. I wore a dress I'd saved for years, deep purple, carefully pressed. I'd had my hair done that morning, the stylist smiling at me in the mirror. "Your son will be so proud," she said. I believed her. The church filled slowly. Guests laughed, hugged, took photos. I stood near the aisle at first, greeting people politely, answering questions about the weather, the venue, the food. Then an usher approached. "Ma'am, your seat is this way." He led me, not toward the front, but several rows back. I hesitated. "I'm the groom's mother." He checked his list again, uncomfortable. "Yes, ma'am. This is what's written." I walked to the seat, heat crawling up my neck. From there, the altar looked far away. I watched other parents, people who'd known Matthew for a fraction of his life, settle into better seats. Brooke's acquaintances sat close, laughing, adjusting their outfits. I sat still. The music began. When Matthew walked down the aisle, I had to lean sideways to see his face. He looked happy. That should have been enough. But joy mixed with something bitter I couldn't swallow. At the reception, it became clearer. Brooke moved through the room like a conductor, directing conversations, guiding attention. I followed behind like a shadow, smiling when spoken to, invisible when not. When she introduced me, it was always brief. "This is Matthew's mom. She cooks really well." Nothing about who I was, nothing about what I'd given. During the toast, I waited. I held my speech folded neatly in my purse, words I'd practiced alone in my kitchen late at night. Names were called one by one. Not mine. Finally, someone asked aloud why I hadn't spoken. Brooke turned toward me, surprised in a way that felt staged. "Oh," she said. "Of course, she can say a few words." A few. I stood slowly, legs unsteady, the room suddenly too large. I spoke about love, about watching my son grow, about wishing them a future built on kindness. I got halfway through before applause broke out. Too soon, too loud. The signal was clear. I sat down, my face burning. Dinner passed in a blur. I was seated at a table with distant relatives who spoke over me, to each other, about people I didn't know. Across the room, Matthew laughed with his new family. When dancing began, I waited. He danced with Brooke, with her mother, with her sisters, not with me. I smoothed my dress and told myself it didn't matter. It did. When I finally decided to leave, I found him near the bar. "I'm heading home," I said softly. He hugged me quickly, distracted. "Thanks for everything, Mom." Brooke appeared instantly at his side. "Thanks for coming," she added. As I walked away, I heard her say to someone else, laughing, "It's easier when mothers-in-law don't live nearby." Laughter followed me out. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and cried until my chest hurt. That night, alone in my house, I looked around at the walls, the furniture, the life I'd built, and realized something terrifying. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being removed. The morning after the wedding, I woke up early out of habit. For 30 years, my body had been trained to rise with responsibility. School lunches, work schedules, sick days, long drives to practices and appointments. Even now, with no one to wake but myself, I made coffee just after dawn. I expected a call, not something dramatic, just a check-in. We made it home. The drive was long. We're exhausted but happy. My phone stayed quiet. By afternoon, I told myself they were busy. Honeymoon plans, packing, starting a new chapter. By evening, the silence pressed heavier. I checked my phone again before bed, then felt foolish for doing it. The next day passed the same way. Then the next. When a full week went by without a single message, something inside me folded in on itself. I decided to call. I rehearsed my tone before dialing. Cheerful, light, supportive. The kind of voice mothers use when they don't want to sound like they're asking for reassurance. "Hi, sweetheart," I said when Matthew answered. "I just wanted to check in. How was the trip?" His response was polite, efficient. "Good, Mom. Everything's good." A pause. "Brooke says hello." Brooke says hello. Not she misses you. Not we'll visit soon. Just a relay message. "I was thinking of dropping by with some cookies," I said, testing the waters. "You always loved—" "We're pretty busy right now," he cut in. "We'll call later." Later never came. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. In the days that followed, I tried not to reach out again. I didn't want to be that mother. The clingy one, the inconvenient one. But loneliness has a way of echoing. I wandered through my house, touching familiar things: the edge of the table, the back of the couch, the door frame where I'd once marked Matthew's height year after year. Every corner held proof that I had mattered once. So I baked, not as an excuse, as a memory. Chocolate cookies, just like when Matthew was little. I tied them neatly with ribbon and drove to their new place, my heart pounding with hope and dread mixed together. Brooke opened the door. She didn't invite me in. "Oh," she said, surprised but not pleased. "Hi. I brought something for Matthew," I said, holding up the basket. She took it from me, inspecting it briefly, like an item being accepted at a front desk. "He's in a meeting," she said. "I'll let him know." The door began to close. I stood there, empty-handed, waiting for something more. A smile, a thank you, a question about my drive. Nothing came. The door shut. On the drive home, I had to pull over. My hands shook on the steering wheel, grief finally finding air. That night, I sat alone at my table, eating a dinner I barely tasted, and remembered something my husband once told me. "If anyone ever makes you feel small," he'd said, "step back and look at what they're really after." At the time, I thought he meant confidence. Now, I understood he meant protection. That was the night I stopped blaming myself, and the night I began to watch more closely. The calls started gently, too gently. "Mom, how are you feeling today? Are you getting enough rest? Have you been finding the house hard to manage?" Brooke's voice had softened into something almost affectionate. She spoke slowly, carefully, like she was handling something fragile, like me. At first, I answered honestly. I said I was fine, busy, content, still tending the garden, still driving myself to the store, still living my life. She never seemed satisfied with those answers. "Well," she'd say, dragging the word out, "we just worry. This place is a lot for one person." Always this place, never your home. One afternoon, she called while I was folding laundry. "Mom," she said warmly, "have you ever thought about downsizing?" I laughed lightly. "Not really. I like it here." There was a pause, short but deliberate. "It's just," she continued, "houses like yours require maintenance. Taxes go up, insurance, and accidents happen. We'd feel better if things were simpler." Simpler. I could almost hear the word controlled hiding behind it. "I'm managing," I said. "Well, of course," she replied quickly. "For now." For now. That phrase stayed with me long after the call ended. Matthew came by a few days later, his first visit since the wedding. He sat on the couch stiffly, not leaning back, keys turning in his hands. The way he used to sit when he was about to confess something. "Mom," he began, not meeting my eyes. "Brooke and I have been talking about your future." "My future?" The words felt borrowed. "I'm listening," I said carefully. He cleared his throat. "We think the house might be too much for you. You seem tired lately." I almost laughed. Tired. As if exhaustion had appeared out of nowhere, not after weeks of being quietly erased. "I'm not tired," I said. "I'm hurt." He flinched, then pressed on. "Brooke knows a great agent. Just to get an appraisal. No pressure." No pressure. His voice didn't sound like his own. It sounded rehearsed. I looked at him. Really looked. And saw conflict written all over his face. Love tangled with loyalty. Guilt battling convenience. That night, after he left, I sat with a cup of tea and replayed every conversation from the past few months. The comments, the concern, the urgency. And suddenly, a pattern emerged. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about positioning. They weren't pushing all at once. They were preparing the ground. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a notebook. I began to write. Dates. Exact phrases. Who said what. Not because I wanted conflict, but because something inside me knew I'd need clarity later. And the more I wrote, the more certain I became. This wasn't love. It was strategy. They didn't ask to come over. They told me they were coming. "We'll stop by Saturday," Brooke said brightly over the phone. "There are a few things we want to go over with you." Not talk about, go over. As if the decisions were already made. They arrived right on time. Matthew's car in the driveway. Brooke stepping out first, folder tucked under her arm like a trophy. It was thick, overstuffed. The kind of folder that carried authority simply by existing. We sat in the living room, my living room. Though it felt less like my space now and more like a meeting room. Brooke opened the folder with ceremony. "We've done a lot of research," she said proudly. Spoken to professionals, people who specialize in helping older adults make smart choices. Older adults. I watched Matthew nod along, eyes fixed on the table. This, Brooke continued, sliding papers toward me, is a plan that keeps you safe, comfortable, and worry-free. Worry-free. The papers were full of charts, bullet points, bold headings. Sell property. Consolidate funds. Simplify living arrangements. It all looked very reasonable. That's what made it dangerous. If I sell the house? I asked quietly. Where would I live? Brooke smiled. We've already looked into some options. Options. She turned the page. Pictures appeared. Clean hallways, identical rooms, stage smiles. A lovely assisted living community, she said. Medical support, activities, security, you'd be taken care of. Taken care of. My stomach dropped. Matthew finally looked up. It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's more like a lifestyle community. A lifestyle, one chosen without me. And the money? I asked. Brooke's tone stayed calm. It would be managed jointly. That way you're protected from bad decisions, scams, stress. Protected. From myself. I looked at my son. Is this what you want? He hesitated, just long enough to hurt. We just want what's best for you, he said. There it was again. Not what you want, what's best. I nodded slowly, letting my shoulders sag. I need time, I said softly. It's a lot. Brooke's smile thinned. Of course, but we shouldn't wait too long. These places fill up. Urgency. Pressure. Control. They left the folder behind. After they drove away, I didn't cry. I sat very still. Then I picked up the folder and read every page carefully. That night, I opened the safe and found the truth that would change everything. I hadn't opened the safe in months, not because I'd forgotten about it, but because opening it felt like crossing a line. A quiet acknowledgement that life had shifted into a place where trust alone was no longer enough. That night, the folder they left behind sat on my kitchen table like a dare. I made sure the doors were locked. The house was silent. Even the refrigerator seemed too loud. I knelt in the pantry and pushed aside the paper towels and canned soup. The safe was small, plain, bolted into the wall years ago at my husband's insistence. Just in case, he'd said back then. Not because we're scared, because we're smart. My hands didn't shake as I entered the code. Inside were the things I expected. Documents I'd glanced at 100 times without really seeing them. Deeds, certificates, insurance papers. And then there was the envelope, thicker than the rest. Tucked behind a file I rarely touched. I didn't recognize the label at first. I sat down at the table and opened it slowly. What I found inside rearranged the ground beneath my feet. It wasn't just property. It was leverage. An asset my husband had secured quietly, legally, and entirely in my name. Something separate from the house. Separate from the life Brooke and Matthew thought they understood. I read the documents twice. Then a third time. Ownership. Control. Clear language. No ambiguity. For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. This wasn't just about money. It was about agency. I realized something then. Something sharp and clarifying. They were making plans based on what they assumed I had. They were wrong. And as I sat there in the dim kitchen light, another realization followed just as quickly. If I told them now, I'd lose the advantage. So I didn't. I returned the documents to the envelope, locked the safe, cleared the folder from the table, and the next morning I made a call. Not to my son, not to my daughter-in-law, but to someone who knew the terrain of quiet battles like this. Someone who understood that manipulation often arrives dressed as concern. Because from that moment on, I stopped reacting and started preparing. They came back sooner than I expected. 2 days after I found the envelope, my phone rang just after lunch. Brooke's voice was bright. Too bright. Mom, we were just talking and thought it'd be easier if we stopped by together. There's someone we'd like you to meet. Someone. Not Matthew, not family. Just someone. My stomach tightened, but I kept my tone mild. All right. They arrived mid-afternoon. This time they weren't alone. The man stepped out of the car first. Dark jacket, leather briefcase, confident stride. He glanced at my house the way people do when they're estimating worth. Brooke followed, smiling like she'd already won. Mom, she said cheerfully, this is Alex. He helps families formalize things. Formalize. Alex shook my hand with practiced warmth. I'm here to make everything smooth and stress-free. Stress-free. They sat exactly where they had last time. Alex opened his briefcase and laid out forms with alarming speed. These documents, he said, are designed to protect you if something unexpected happens. They ensure continuity. Continuity. The word sounded permanent. I listened. I nodded. I asked simple questions. How long does this last? What if I change my mind? Alex's answers were polished. Well, these measures are typically long-term. Changing course later can be complicated. Complicated. Brooke leaned in close, lowering her voice. This is just us looking out for you, Mom. I felt it then. The shift from suggestion to pressure. Alex slid a pen toward me. Just a few signatures, he said. I looked at the dotted lines. They weren't asking for help. They were asking for surrender. And that's when I made my move. I'm happy to sign, I said softly, but I'd like everything read aloud first. The room stilled. Brooke blinked. That's not necessary. It is for me, I replied calmly. I need to understand. Alex hesitated. Just a second too long. I saw it, and I knew. I had them exactly where I needed them. Alex cleared his throat. Well, he said, smiling tightly. Reading everything out loud can take time. I have time, I replied. Brooke's smile faltered. Just a flicker. But I saw it. She reached for the papers as if to speed things along. Mom, this is all standard language. You don't need to worry yourself with the details. I folded my hands in my lap. If it's standard, I said gently, then it shouldn't be a problem. Silence stretched. Matthew shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should just... The doorbell rang. Not a polite tap, not a casual ring. A firm, deliberate press. Every head turned. Brooke frowned. Are you expecting someone? I stood slowly. My heart wasn't racing this time. It was steady, focused. Yes, I said. I am. Her eyes narrowed. Who? I'll show you. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Rachel stood there first. My oldest friend, eyes sharp, posture firm. Beside her was a man in a tailored suit holding a slim folder, his expression calm and unreadable. Hi, Suzanne, Rachel said warmly. Hope we're not interrupting? The man beside her extended his hand. I'm here at Suzanne's request. Brooke's face drained of color. Alex stiffened. Matthew looked between us, confused. Mom, what's going on? I stepped aside and let them in. Please, I said, my voice clearer than it had been in weeks. Join us. The living room felt smaller now, heavier. The man set his folder on the table, right beside Alex's briefcase. I've been asked to observe today's discussion, he said calmly, and to ensure Suzanne fully understands any documents presented to her. Alex's confident posture cracked. That won't be necessary. It already is, I replied. Rachel came to stand beside me, her presence solid as a wall. Brooke tried to laugh. This is all a misunderstanding. We're just helping family. Then transparency shouldn't be an issue, the man said evenly. He looked at me. Would you like to explain why you asked me here? I nodded. Yes, I said, finally letting the truth breathe. Because I was being pressured to sign documents I didn't ask for, don't agree with, and don't fully understand. Matthew's mouth opened slightly. Pressured? I turned to him. You brought someone into my home to take control of my life. That feels like pressure. Brooke stood abruptly. Mom, that's not fair. Sit down, I said. The room froze. I hadn't raised my voice, but I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't asking for space. I was taking it. No one sat down. Not Brooke, not Alex, not even Matthew. They stood there like actors who'd forgotten their lines. The man Rachel brought, calm, precise, opened his folder and spoke evenly. Before any documents are discussed, I need to know what authority each person here believes they have. Alex straightened, trying to recover. I'm simply here to witness signatures. Witness what? The man asked. Alex hesitated. I stepped forward. They're asking me to sell my home, I said clearly, transfer control of my finances, and move into housing I did not choose. Matthew's face drained of color. That's not... I raised my hand, not angrily, just firmly. He stopped. I want you all to understand something, I continued. I didn't invite you here today to argue. I invited witnesses because I needed clarity. I walked to the pantry. For a moment, no one spoke. When I returned, I carried the safe in both hands and placed it on the table with a dull, undeniable thud. Brooke's eyes widened. Alex leaned back slightly. I opened it slowly, deliberately, and removed the envelope. This, I said, laying the documents out one by one, is what none of you asked about. I watched their faces as understanding spread. First confusion, then shock. The man Rachel brought scanned the pages carefully. His expression didn't change, but his tone did. These assets are solely in Suzanne's name, he said. They are not contingent on the sale of this home, nor are they subject to joint control. Brooke swallowed hard. We didn't know about that. No, I agreed. You didn't, because you never asked what I wanted. You only assumed what I had. Matthew stared at the papers, then at me. Mom, why didn't you tell us? I met his eyes. Because I needed to know why you were suddenly so interested in managing my life. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Alex closed his briefcase. Slowly, quietly, Brooke's confidence collapsed into something brittle. This changes things, she said weakly. I nodded. Yes, it does. Because now the truth was on the table, and they could no longer pretend this was about my safety. It was about control. No one spoke for a long moment. The kind of silence that comes when a game ends suddenly and the winner wasn't who everyone expected. Brooke was the first to move. She tried to smile, but it came out crooked, rushed. Mom, you have to understand. We were just trying to help. If we'd known about this, we would have approached things differently. Differently. Not respectfully, not with permission, just differently. Alex cleared his throat, already gathering his papers. I don't think my presence is required anymore, he said, avoiding eye contact. That's correct. The man Rachel brought replied calmly. And I'd advise you to leave your documents here. Alex hesitated, then complied. He knew when a situation had turned dangerous. Matthew finally spoke, his voice low. Mom, I didn't realize it looked like this, because you didn't want to. I answered gently. That seemed to hurt him more than anger would have. Brooke stepped closer, her tone shifting. Urgent now. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. Families disagree sometimes. We can talk privately. No, I said. One word. Clear, complete. I'm done talking privately, I continued, because privacy is where pressure thrives. Rachel squeezed my hand. I looked at my son. You don't get to decide my life for me. You don't get to outsource concern to someone else and call it love. Matthew's eyes filled. I thought I was protecting you. Protection without consent is control, I said. And control ends today. Brooke's mask cracked fully then. Frustration bled through. So what? Are you cutting us off? I'm setting boundaries, I replied. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on my terms. Transparent, respectful, no documents, no experts, no decisions made without me. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The man Rachel brought spoke once more. Given what's been presented, I recommend all further communication go through counsel. Alex was already at the door. Brooke followed, stiff and silent. Matthew lingered. Can we talk later? He asked quietly. I nodded once. We can talk when actions match words. When the door closed behind them, I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I sat down in my armchair and felt something unfamiliar settle into place. Relief. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally chosen myself. And that choice, calm, firm, irreversible, was the beginning of everything that came next.